Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm actually on the set of a different channel that I do, Hopeful Ballistics, but the chair's comfortable and I've got all the lights set up, so I'm just going to use this little set for today. As you can see by the title of the video, it's a very serious accusation that I'm making, and I'm not going to get in a hurry. Hopefully you'll take some time, have a little patience with me. I do summarize things fairly quickly, so I'm just going to move along, and it should not be boring. It'll be kind of hard-hitting, but it will take a little bit of time. But I'm going to explain, in my opinion, why progressivism is a cancer to society. And to be more specific, I'm saying it's a disease that's spreading and taking over, just like when cancer takes over different organs of the body and just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading until it destroys its host. That's what progressivism is doing. I will say right off the bat, I'm going to generalize and oversimplify a lot of things for sake of time, but I think the point will be clear of what I'm trying to say. Also, let me define a few words, because I'm not using them maybe as Webster's Dictionary or Wikipedia would, define them. So let me explain to you what I mean by these, certain words. So when I say the word progressive, I'm referring to a person who politically or ideologically would consider themselves on the left, and I believe they're authoritarian. I'm not specifically referring to Democrats, though that is definitely associated with that term. Now, I think most people understand what right and left means and what authoritarian or libertarian means, but just in case, let me give you a very brief explanation. The terms right and left really trace back to the French Revolution, when the people on the right side of the royal court or the Parliament House were more loyal to the king. They believed more in tradition, and they didn't want things to change a whole lot. And the people that sit on the left side of the court were more of the rebellious side that wanted a revolution, wanted things to change, and did not support the monarchy as much. And so, generally speaking, people on the left are more wanting to overthrow things, wanting to progress past things we've done in the past, thinking a lot of things from the past were wrong or evil and we need to move on past. And people on the right, also called conservatives, want to conserve things from the past that they believe were good. They're maybe more traditional. Now let me be clear. Those definitions or that explanation in itself would not make progressive thinking or feeling wrong or right. And in fact, it really depends on the situation you're talking about. There are times to be progressive. We need to move past some things that were wrong. A good example is slavery. Slavery, I think any rational person can agree, was completely evil, but it was a part of life and had been a part of life really since the beginning of mankind. You can read about it in the Bible. The Bible does not condone slavery, despite what some people tell you, but it was definitely part of life, and so it was in the Bible too. There was different kinds of servanthood, of course. Some you would become someone's slave for a certain period of time to pay off debts, and then several other kinds, but then the worst of all is when you're treated as if you're cattle. Basically, you're just property, and you're not an equal human. We've seen all kinds of slavery, and they're all wrong. They're all evil. But even getting back to the United States in the 1800s, around the time of our Civil War, in that context, being against slavery would have been a progressive idea, because slavery was the tradition, right? It had been going on for a long time. And so just to want to move past something, to think something that's part of the status quo is evil or wrong and want to progress past it, that in itself is not wrong. And in the example of slavery, was the right thing to do. Sometimes things are a very normal part of life that everyone seems to be okay with, or most people seem to be okay with. And then in retrospect, we look back and we're thinking, how were people okay with that? Personally, I think abortion is the same thing. I don't understand how we think it's okay to kill your unborn child. And I hope, fingers crossed, far in the future we'll look back and think of how normalized abortion was, and and think, how in the world have we thought that was okay? Similar to how we look back on slavery today. But the point is, just because an idea could be progressive and against tradition, I'm not saying it's automatically bad. In fact, let me show you a short little minute-long clip kind of explaining this right here. Are you conservative or progressive? In reality, we should sometimes be both, conserving the good things and progressing toward some better things. As an example, forming a republic with democracy, checks and balances, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and limited government at the time might have been perceived a progressive accomplishment. Now, holding to those same principles and trying to preserve them could be considered a conservative mission. Point being, the same exact thing could be championed as a progressive and a conservative ideology. The only difference is the foresight or hindsight perspective. Not every idea from the past needs replacing. Not every idea going forward needs resistance. I think it's when we feel like we should be completely one way or the other that we get into trouble, or we're pressured to go to one of the extremes. Plenty of new ideas that go against tradition have been major successes and improvements. Plenty of old ideas that hold to a tradition are pure gold and worth fighting to keep. Okay, so hopefully that explains kind of what I'm talking about. Now, the other part of this is authoritarian versus libertarian. Basically, if you're an authoritarian, you believe somebody or some group needs to control everyone else and tell them what to do. And I'm sure you're going to justify it by saying it's for the betterment of society, or it's because people are stupid, or whatever the case. But you believe somebody needs to be in control and have authority. Libertarian, of course, just believes in personal liberty. You do what you want to do, I'll do what I want to do. Let's let everyone just live their lives the way they want to live it. Now, I personally lean libertarian, but the extreme end of libertarian, where there's no government, no regulation, no authority at all, is chaos and anarchy and would be insanity. And so just like the extreme ends of being left or right are crazy, in my opinion, the extreme ends of authoritarianism and libertarianism are crazy as well. Here's another short minute-long video kind of explaining this. Are you an authoritarian or a libertarian? Hopefully, somewhere in the middle. The extreme end of each would be flat-out insane, either dictatorial or anarchical. There are positive and negative aspects of both. Finding the balance of regulation and freedom is the key. I'm really glad for law enforcement policing to keep my home and my community safe. They have authority over me to a degree, but with checks and balances, of course. I'm also really glad I can pursue my dreams, interests, and goals, specifically life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Both are needed. When we are too authoritarian, we might seek to control others and force them to follow our beliefs. Force can be applied physically or by social pressure and cancel culture. When we are too libertarian, we might seek to mistreat or maltreat others for selfish gain without fear of accountability. Okay, so now that I've hopefully laid that foundation where you understand what I'm talking about, and hopefully I've explained that I'm a rational person, that I don't believe just all in on one way. I believe in our current day, at least in America, that's my reference, that progressivism is a cancer, destroying all parts of society. Once again, progressivism, liberalism, people on the left, Democrats, they're all kind of connected. Now you can read a exact definition of these terms, and they're all different. They're not exactly the same, but yet they're interchangeable. Same way with traditional, conservative, Republican would be more on the right. Those terms are all interchangeable, but they don't actually all mean the same thing. Some people will call this the Overton window, but basically there's kind of a spectrum, and at the top you have authoritarian, the bottom libertarian, and then, now I'm going to reverse this for you, but on the left you have, leftist policies and then right policies. And then where are you at in this spectrum? Are you to the left? Are you to the right? Are you authoritarian? Are you libertarian? Personally, I lean more to the right and libertarian, and I believe that the progressivism I'm talking about would be the complete opposite, is on the left and authoritarian. Now, in America, the Democratic Party and people, liberals, for a long time in this country, we're really not that far on the left. Really, I'd say from the 50s to the 90s, or the 60s to the 90s, the Democratic Party was pretty moderate in America, especially compared to other parts of the world where their leftist party were much further on the left. Well, today in 2024, that's definitely changed. The Democratic Party and those on the left have moved very far to the extreme left. For a long time, the Democratic Party in America and people on the left were very much libertarian. In fact, they probably championed, free speech, free expression, things like that, more so than did the right. When I was growing up, I would say that's the case. Not that the right was against free speech at all, but it just seemed like it was championed more by the left and the Democrats. So this is my terminology. I just want you to understand what I'm saying. So to me, there's a difference between liberalism and progressivism. Once again, not book definitions, mine. When I look at the left, but I look at them as libertarian left, to me that's liberalism. That's what the Democratic Party was for a long time. Pro-free speech, pro-libertarian. They were more big government, and so it's not an exact comparison, but in a lot of ways they were more of a libertarian leftist party like the Democratic Party. So that to me would be liberalism. So when I think of a liberal growing up, that's the person I would think of. Someone who was on the left but more libertarian. Well, today, like I said, they've moved very far to the left, but they've also moved very authoritarian. COVID brought this out. I mean, if you didn't do what we say because we know better, then you're an evil person and you need to be deplatformed and you need to have your speech canceled and you basically need to lose your job and all kinds of other things if you don't do what we tell you to do. That's what we learned during COVID. And that authoritarianism came from the left, came from the Democratic Party. And so when I say progressives, I am referring to people on the left that are very much authoritarian. So that's the difference between liberals and progressives in my way of thinking about it. So now for the rest of the video, when I say progressives or progressivism, you know I'm referring to the modern left in America that is very authoritarian. It's also something to point out that the word progress is not a bad word. It's kind of like Black Lives Matter. People on the left are good at creating titles and names that when you go against them, it sounds like you're going against Black lives or you're going against progress. So if I'm against the organization Black Lives Matter, it doesn't mean I'm against Black lives. It doesn't mean I disagree that Black lives matter. Of course Black lives matter. All lives matter. Same with being a progressive, that's a term they coined. Yes, it shows that they're on the left, which is more progressive-ish, but it also is a good word. Generally progress is a good word. If you're building a house, the more progress you do, the closer to getting the house together that you are. In order to complete a project or an assignment, you have to show progress. But the thing is, it's really not progress. It's only progress if you believe in the end goal that they believe in. Let me just throw out some things that progressives are sympathetic towards. Now, this does not mean that every person who votes Democrat or every person who is a self-proclaimed progressive would agree with these things, because we know that there's people very far to the left, very far to the right, very moderate, and then all in between. And you also could be very much pro-capitalism on the right, but when it comes to social issues, you could be very much on the left. So depending on the issue, you could be all over this spectrum or all over this Overton window. I'm oversimplifying, but generally speaking, progressives are sympathetic to these ideas. First of all, if you have a group of people talking about how bad America is, how evil America was when it was founded, or how evil it is today, more than likely these are progressives. So they have a negative view of our country. They have a negative view of our Constitution, or at least parts of our Constitution. A lot of them want it to be overthrown, would be 100% okay with our government collapsing, our country collapsing. I'm not saying they wish us to be overtaken by someone else. I'm just saying they want it to collapse and crumble to the ground so they can rebuild it with a different constitution, with things like the right to bear arms taken out, things like the right to freedom of speech to be altered or changed, so that they can throw in some clause about hate speech, which basically means anything that they dislike can be against the law to say. And so, generally speaking, a hate for this country, a hate for its history, a hate for its Constitution is going to come more from progressives. And yes, our Constitution and our Bill of Rights give us awesome rights that 99% of the other countries in the world have never had. And that's one thing that makes America special and great. That's not something bad. Okay, that's not something to look down upon. The next thing, if you have a group of people all together and they're putting down the Bible, they're putting down Christianity, more than likely they're voting Democrat and they're progressives. Once again, there's exceptions, and this is an oversimplification, but I'm just saying to be anti-Christian or to view Christianity in a negative light is a progressive thing. They want any semblance of the Ten Commandments, of the Bible, of God taken out of society. And most of the people who are Christians, but yet vote progressive, either one, they vote Democrat or progressive because their dad did and their grandpa did before that, and it's just the tradition for them to vote that way, even though the party that they're voting for today is dramatically different from the party of their forefathers. Or in a lot of cases, it's progressive churches. And I'm going to get to that here in a second, but progressivism has taken over a big chunk of mainline Protestant denominations today. And they basically don't even believe in the Bible, or at least they only believe in the parts that they want to believe in. They're more universalist, believing everyone goes to heaven. And the only thing you can do that's bad in their minds is to go against LGBT people or ideas. So they hate our country, they hate traditional Christianity, they hate traditional ideas, of course, like the family. You know, before there was ever any Democratic or Republican Party, before there was ever a country like the U.S., before there was ever any country at all, before there was ever any government, before there was ever a king or a president, before there was ever any kind of organization, period, there was a family. The first thing God ever created was the family. Okay, one man, one woman, procreating to bring forth children. And so the family unit comes from God Himself, and we see it in the Bible, and it's been a traditional teaching, and it's not something that we humans came up with, but it's simply what we believe God has ordained, the family. And so they hate the traditional view of the family. So they hate our country, the founders of our country, they hate Christianity, and they hate the idea of the traditional family. So how is progressivism just a cancer to society? I'm going to give you several examples of parts of life where they've completely taken over or are trying to take over. Some are more important than others, but I think they're all good examples. And so the big one really is politics. They lean communist or socialist. Definitely there's Democrats that are not communist at all. They're full-on capitalists, but they vote Democrat. I understand that. But if one side leans communist or socialist, it's for sure progressive. Kind of touched on the political part of it, and that's the more obvious part. But let's move beyond that. The educational system. If there's ever a place where they have completely taken over a system of our life, of our society, it is the education system, especially universities. Universities are the cancer has spread so far that it's just a dead corpse lying there. People at this point that go to college, these kids are just getting brainwashed. It's so far to the left, and it's really blatant. It's like they're not even trying to hide it, that they're just going to get brainwashed. Am I saying there's no good in college at all? No, there is some good professors. There is definitely good knowledge to be gained, but it's so corrupted and so clouded by an agenda and indoctrination that it's really not even worth going to a university anymore unless you want to be like a doctor or a lawyer. Progressives have basically just completely taken over the university system, and that's why all these kids growing up pretty much come out of college full on progressives, thinking that someone like me is a racist, evil, bigoted person when I'm not at all. But that's what they've been told to believe, and that everything I'm standing for is wrong and old and needs to be destroyed. So all of our young people that go to college are literally just getting brainwashed by progressivism in our universities. Now, it's not just in universities, it's also in your local public schools. It's not quite as dramatic depending on where you're at. If you're in a little town in the Midwest in the Bible Belt, it probably still leans left to a degree, but not as much. And the members of your school board are probably more moderate and not as far leaning left. If you're in an inner city, more than likely you're very much on the left. So your local public schools are definitely infected by progressivism for sure, but not quite to the level of the universities. But the educational system as a whole has completely been taken over. I mentioned like a public school in an inner city. That brings me to my next point. The cities across America are completely taken over. They are run by progressive mayors and school boards and councils. It is very interesting. The further you get away from these echo chambers that are these cities, and the more rural you get, the less indoctrinated you get, the more independent thinking people are, and they typically lean more conservative. All you have to do is look at a map of counties and districts and how they vote, whether it's red or blue. Blue being for Democrats, red being for Republicans. The vast majority of the country is red, and you'd think, oh, there's so many more Republicans, but really it's not that way, because they're all concentrated in these cities, because they've literally taken over all these cities. They've taken over the media. Now, luckily, in the year 2024, because of the internet, it's not quite as bad as it used to be. Someone like me, even though I don't have a very big audience, can get on here and tell you something, and it at least has the potential to reach millions of people. So just because of the rise of technology and the ease of which information can be disseminated, it's gotten a little better. But I remember growing up as a kid, there was no internet, and there basically was 3 channels. I think Fox had come on the scene by that time, but they really didn't have any news programs. It was just like The Simpsons and shows like that were on Fox. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS. And everyone got their news from one of those sources, or newspapers, the New York Times, the Washington Post. And so either from a newspaper or from one of those 3 networks is where you got your information. And they were 100% controlled by the left. They weren't near as open about their left leanings back then. There was more of a reporting of the news, and it did come across more fair and balanced, but obviously it was left leaning. And here's just a quick thing about bias in the media. The number one bias in the media is in the stories they don't cover. It's not in the stories they do cover. Notice that. Your particular outlet that you watch or listen to or read, notice the things they don't talk about that other people do talk about. The next level of bias in the media comes on how much they report about it. Is it a story that meets their narrative? When that cop, dirty cop, killed George Floyd, it met the narrative that they wanted to present. And so it's all they're going to talk about for the next, 100 days. January 6th met the narrative that they wanted to preach. And so that's been every word out of their mouth, in every breath since that day happened. If a story doesn't, meet their narrative and it's not one they really want to report about it, if it's so big they have to report on it, and they can't do what I said was number 1, where they don't even talk about it. If it's such a big story they have to talk about it, you'll notice how little coverage that it gets. They will bring it up, they'll have some people come on to discuss it, and then they'll move away from it as quickly as possible. But if it meets their narrative, it'll be front page, lead story, and they'll just pump it continually because it's what they want to talk about. And then finally, the third thing where there's a bias in the media is the actual reporting of the news itself. You'll definitely see angles like, okay, you're reporting the news, but yet you're going at it from this angle, You're emphasizing certain words or certain parts of the story and skimming right past other parts of the story. So the bias in the media happens in those three ways, and the part we see is only that third way, but parts 1 and 2 are the bigger bias that you don't see. But growing up, it was completely controlled by the left. And I remember when talk radio first came out, people like Rush Limbaugh, and there was definite talk of how can we shut this down? He's propagating hate speech. Basically, he was just having a different point of view that they hated and they didn't have control over it. And so they wanted to stop him. And so talk radio was that first, round where people actually were hearing a different perspective, and a little bit of control slipped away and they hated it. And then the internet came out and podcasts and Fox News came out, and now it's way more clear. They're not trying to hide it like they used to. Fox News obviously leans to the right. MSNBC, CNN, CBS, and about 20 others obviously lean to the left. But now it's a little bit different. So they don't have the control they used to, but they still have control of the mainstream media. And that leads me to the new media, which is social media. They have, definitely have control. Once again, all you have to do is look back to COVID. If you even talked about the fact you weren't getting the vaccine, or you were worried about getting the vaccine, or even saying the word COVID vaccine, you would get either demonetized or deplatformed by social media. The FBI during the 2020 election went to Facebook and Twitter and different people and literally told them to watch out for Russian propaganda and all this stuff. And so they literally censored stories about Hunter Biden's laptop, and it was literally to help get Biden elected. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but when it comes to Christianity, the progressives have came in, and you look at Protestant denominations like Presbyterian and Methodist. These denominations, these mainline denominations, are completely taken over by progressivism. They basically disregard any part of the Bible that they don't agree with. If the Bible has a verse or talks about something, but it goes against their LGBT views, then they're going to just pretend like it either doesn't actually say what it clearly says, or they don't care what the Bible says. So the progressive Christian churches have just completely threw out the Bible. The only parts of the Bible that they will preach from or talk about are the parts that they like. They have created a God in their image that agrees with everything they believe, and the things that we know about God from the Bible that goes against what they believe, they disregard, they exclude, they ignore. And so they've basically created idols of God that they choose to worship instead of the real God. Almost all of the progressive pro-LGBT churches and people are universalists. They simply say, everyone's going to heaven. As long as you love people, then you're going to heaven. Or they don't even believe in heaven or hell. They don't even believe in supernatural. I mean, the progressive church either twists the Bible to fit what they want it to say, they completely forget about what the Bible says and don't even use it, or they're sitting in those churches saying they're Christian, preaching love, but they don't even believe in the resurrection of Jesus, in the creation of the world by God, in an afterlife. I mean, in a lot of these cases, the progressive church are not even people that believe in the supernatural, people that really believe in anything. They're just simply came in like a cancer and corrupted and took over and destroyed the churches. And so I will throw this out there to any Christians watching this. There's a tendency with Christians to not talk about politics. Let's just talk about the Bible. Let's just talk about the gospel and good things like that. I'm telling you, the number one enemy you have today is progressivism, and it's destroying your church. Okay, so we've talked about politics in our country, the future of our country, the universities, the media, the churches. They've come in and corrupted all these things, even in pop culture. Now, this is going to seem like a very insignificant topic compared to the other things, but it's a good example. In movies, in sports, they're just coming in and corrupting it. They want to come in and force things like a pride night at a hockey game down everyone's throat, when a lot of those people do not want to be part of that. They just want to come watch a hockey game. But yet the progressives have come in and forced down Pride Night and all these things. They definitely tried to do it in the NFL. They basically, you had people kneeling because they wouldn't salute our flag. And you had all these things entering into the NFL. There was some blowback there, and they've kind of moved away from that because money talks. The only reason that they moved away from that is because they thought that they might lose some money. But it's got into sports. I know a lot of people that won't even watch sports anymore because they're so sick of being infiltrated with progressive ideas that they don't agree with. They just want to watch a sporting event. They don't want to hear about politics. They want to see sports. Same with movies. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I grew up, the original Star Wars movies were my favorite movies of all time. I still think they're excellent movies. When Disney took over, they are on a mission. They have an agenda. They're not trying to make great Star Wars films or TV shows to please their fans. They have an agenda. They've basically, like a cancer, it's come in and it's destroyed everything. And it's simply using the vessel of Star Wars as a media or as a medium to present their agenda. Here's the thing. Star Wars was never a political thing. Someone on the left or someone on the right could both love Star Wars. There was a strong lead character in Princess Leia in the original Star Wars movies. We never thought a thing about it. There was one of the main actors was a black man, Lando. We all loved Lando. Never thought a thing about it. And so this idea that you have to inject all these things is dumb. There was already a diverse cast. There was already a strong female lead. First of all, if you want to make a movie about LGBTQ ideas, you want to make a movie with a strong female lead, then go do it. It's fine. You do what you want to do. You make the movies you want to do. But that shouldn't be your agenda when making a Star Wars movie. Your agenda comes before the actual, hey, let's make a good sci-fi movie and show these characters we've always loved doing cool things. That's a very small thing. Star Wars is in the big scheme of things, a very insignificant thing. But that's the point. All areas of life, whether it's movies, TV, sports, or whether it's the big things, that I've talked about, politics and media and education and religion, they just come in and try to take every bit of it over. Our cities, completely taken over. They've even got into the corporate world. A lot of the corporate world was always very pro-capitalist for obvious reasons. And so they weren't really on the left, but they've got into them. They have put so much pressure with a mob-like mentality that if you don't follow what we want you to do and support us, then we're going to deplatform you, we're going to cancel you, all this garbage. That most of the heads of these organizations and these billionaires, except for Elon Musk and maybe one or two more, they're all on the left. So the corporate world's been totally taken over and corrupted by progressivism. All you have to do is look at California. California was once, the shining beacon of America. And it is, look at the cities of California. And just look at the economy of California. It is collapsing because it has been completely taken over by progressivism. They keep installing more and more leftist, authoritarian ideas and laws and policies in place, and it's hurting and destroying everything over there. And so more and more companies are just having to leave because they can't pay these taxes and they can't do all these things. And so more and more revenue is leaving California, going to other places. And so what do? To counteract this loss of revenue, they raise taxes even more. And so they just keep raising taxes. More and more people keep leaving California and taking their businesses elsewhere. And eventually, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to have to turn into a socialist or communist, state, which basically means everyone loses all their freedom and all their rights, and the government controls everything and divvies out whatever they think you should have. Or they're going to get some Republicans and some conservatives back in there, some capitalists back in there that are going to revitalize, bring back law and order, bring back safety and security, bring back lower taxes and some common sense back to California. One of those two things is going to have to happen. But California is a great example of what The empty shell left over once progressivism takes over, that's what it's going to look like. The Star Wars franchise currently, what it is today compared to what it used to be, is a great example of what is left over once the cancer has eaten away at the complete thing that it has, the host that is taken over. Look at the kids coming out of college today. Obviously there's some bright people coming out that go on to have success, and more than likely they're trying to avoid all the garbage that they're hearing and just focusing on the academic part of college. But all you have to do is watch a Charlie Kirk or a Ben Shapiro video where they go to college, talk to the actual indoctrinated college students, and just listen to these college students. And you can see the indoctrination spewing out of them. And then they're unable to actually have a debate with these people because they realize they're wrong and don't even know how to combat different ideas that they've not heard in their echo chambers before. And so then it just becomes a name-calling thing where they say, well, you're evil and racist, and I'm not going to listen to this, and they walk away. I mean, how many more examples do I have to give for you to understand? Progressivism is destroying this country. Now, am I saying anyone who votes Democrat is trying to destroy this country? No. I believe 90% of the people who vote Democrat, who are progressive, believe they're doing the right thing and think they're on the right side. And so I think they're deceived, and I definitely think that their motives are pure. But at the core, the people who really understand it and know what they're doing, they are trying to destroy America, because that's what progressivism is. They want control. They're authoritarian. They're on the left. We have to destroy everything from the past, including Christianity, including traditional values, including our Constitution, and they have to rip it up and create it in their image. I could go on and on and on, but I'm afraid this video is just going to go on for hours at what they're doing. But I hope you do your own research. I hope you really think about these things. If you're a Christian watching this, your number one goal should be to get progressivism out of your churches. If you're someone who's watching this who doesn't really care about politics, you just are sick of, these things being pushed down your throat in sports and in movies, then you need to fight it. You need to boycott these movies and sports that are trying to do this and put your money in other places. If you do believe me and you are concerned about the current and future state of the educational system, of our politics, of our cities across America, then you need to stop voting for Democrats. Once again, 20, 30 years ago, the Democrats were more libertarian, and it just came down to a difference of ideas. Do you believe this way or do you believe this way? But neither side was really trying to control the other. But today that's changed. They want to destroy everything that you've ever loved. For the progressive that's watching this, if you are pro-choice, if you're not a big fan of capitalism and you like more socialistic government and all these other things, if you just simply are on the left politically and I'm on the right and we disagree, that's not a bad thing. It's okay for us to disagree. We can have a healthy debate and we can settle our differences at the ballot box and do things in a respectful way. But when you become authoritarian and you decide, because this is what the progressives have decided, the people on the right, number one, are stupid. They think that they're the educated elites and we're the stupid peasants who don't know any better. And you think that we're, deplorables, as Hillary Clinton said, that we're evil, racist, wicked people. If you really believe that and you think you need to control me, then I'm against you and we got to fight in our hands. And so that's what I'm really against. Not that our ideas are different. It's okay to believe something different than me, but to try to force me to, do and think the way you want me to think, become part of the liberal progressive hive mind, and basically become a robot that serves you and has no independent thought. It's not going to happen. For everyone watching this, that's what progressivism is doing. It's trying to control you, and if you won't be controlled, you'll be canceled. And in the meantime, they're going to come in and they're going to take over every aspect of life from the inside out until it rots away and it falls apart and it's destroyed. And then they'll renew it and make it in their image into what they want it to be. And once again, the majority of them think, because they're brainwashed, that this is the right thing to do and it's the good for humanity, but it's not. it will destroy everything. So many more things to say. I could do a part 2 of this if you want me to. If anyone sees this and wants me to do a part 2, comment below. Definitely want to hear your opinion, whether you agree with me or disagree with me. Say whatever you want to say. You can, if you think I'm wrong, it's okay to tell me that. Just be civil about it. Just be respectful about it. We can talk about it. Maybe you can teach me some things. Maybe I can teach you a few things. But we can definitely learn from each other. That's definitely what I want to happen. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, take care.